Hey everyone, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another discussion video, where today, finally after this whole entire time, we finally got the reveal for the PlayStation 5, and I gotta tell you right now, I was very worried, I guess in a way, I was very impatient about this, but more so, I just got more aggravated, and I've been wanting to talk about more about the PlayStation 5 before it finally was being revealed and stuff like that, because we hardly got any information out of it at all. And keep in mind, we have known about this for months on months, even a couple of years now, technically. And the fact that they hadn't shown anything up until now was very disconcerting, and it was very aggravating, especially for me. But now that we finally have the reveal for the PlayStation 5, what do I think about it? And you know, it's kind of interesting to kind of talk about it, especially since, you know, here we are now. We're finally fixing to move into the next generation. But I have to say, I mean, I wasn't too impressed, but I wasn't underwhelmed. I guess that's the word. I don't know. I guess the word I'm trying to look for is that I wasn't amused, but I was gratified about what I saw, considering the situation that we're in right now. And before I talk about all the stuff and everything that was going on with the PS5, as well as like the system and the games, I just have to say that when it comes down to it, while the games aren't bad and the system isn't bad itself, everyone else was hammering about how Sony was all about innovation. Sony was about progressing the gaming industry to the next frontier or something like that. And I'm like, do any of you even own a PlayStation system? You know, just any and genuine. Because if you played a PlayStation system, chances are you're already familiar with how Sony does things. They've never been innovated. If nothing else, the only thing they usually do is try to copy what another platform is doing. Especially with like the Nintendo system with the Wii and the Wii U. Sony tries to copy them in that front, what with the move controls and stuff like that. And then, of course, you have the fact that the VR system that they use, technically the Oculus Rift has been around for even longer. So, really, to say that Sony innovates gaming, I wouldn't say they innovate anything. If nothing else, Sony has always been about one thing and one thing only: immersing the player into the game. And when you hear about it from like other people, it sounds like they're trying to create like this blend of VR and everything of that nature. But no, that's not what Sony does. Sony is about making a game where the player will feel immersed in any way they feel. You know, whether it's like through sound, through movement, or how the gameplay feels when you touch the controller. So the good thing is that while technically we have advanced, the reality is we haven't really advanced that far out. It's just nice to see this comfortable progression that we as gamers are familiar with. And for me personally, it's what it needs to be. It's just what it needs to be is a better system. So with that being said, now we can finally talk about the system. You know, we finally see what the system is. And at first, we only saw the reveal of the controller, you know, the controller that contains a new program known as DualSense. And technically this is more of an enhanced version of the DualShock, basically where, much like how if you're familiar with the HD rumble that's on the Joy-Cons of the Nintendo Switch, that's kind of where it's going to be at, is an advanced vibration controls, and it's supposed to deliver in a better sense of how movement, how the world affects you in terms of motion. And so really it's supposed to improve immersion in terms of the game through the controller itself. And so beyond that, the controller doesn't look that massively different compared to the PS4 controller. You obviously still have your touchpad, you have your normal controller buttons, the analog stick, so on and so forth. It's just the DualSense is a little bit different in terms of how the DualShock was in the PS4. But my only complaint was the fact that it looked like it was going to be white. You know, the standard color for the PS5 is going to be white. And sure enough, it is white. And I have a little bit about that, but aside from color, what do I think about the system? Honestly, I actually like it. I really do. Is it weird looking? Yeah, it is. But I kind of like it. I like it whenever a system doesn't go for a traditional look. Like, we've seen the PlayStation 2, and, it was interesting. It was an interesting design. It was a black box, essentially, but it was an interesting design. But the PS3 and the PS4, it didn't really go that far different in terms of designs. It still kind of looked like a common evolution. And so to see the PS5 the way it looks now, it's kind of nice to see how it definitely has kind of changed and of how it kind of looks. And personally, I kind of like it. There are some people, however, though, that are complaining about how ridiculous it looks. Some people say it's too big because they're judging it based on the disk drive that's in it and stuff. And it's like, I can tell you right now, from measuring my disk drive, that the PS5 isn't nearly as big as what people are giving it out to be, Keep in mind, we're talking about a normal disc, the Blu-ray disc. It's a basic size disc, It's not a GameCube disc. It's not a record player disc. It's the normal disc that we have seen for, past 20 years now? I mean, again, it's not a DVD or a CD disc, but Blu-ray's discs aren't exactly any bigger in terms of physical size specs compared to a DVD or a CD. So I don't think it's as big as what people are saying, but also, too, technically, this system, they show it advertisingly as standing up, but so far, people have noticed that you can actually lay it down flat, so it's not completely immobile. You can lay it down on its side. It's just, when it comes to Sony, they always advertise it showing upward. We always do it laying down. At least for the most of us who owns a PlayStation system, that's usually what we do. But why do they advertise it sideways, And I think I can understand where it's coming from based on the system's design. Like, when you look at the design of the system, you immediately think to yourself, why is it designed like this? It's not ugly, it's not weird. You think to yourself, you're like, why is it designed? It isn't until you look at the system closer that you start to realize the practical reasoning for its design, and that is to collect air to keep the system cool. I mean, if any of you have owned a PlayStation 4 system, you know how much it has to gradually bring in terms of air just to keep it cool. And depending on how much dust is collected, it can heat up pretty quick. I know with my PlayStation 4, and keep in mind, it was I believe it was one of the first models, if not the first model, but the second in production line of the first model. But it does heat up quite a bit. It's not the Pro, it's not the Slim, it's literally the first model. But with this new version of the PS5, seeing the system as it is, seeing how the design is, I can see why they advertise it showing it sideways. It's because it can collect air better, probably. And maybe that's a better way for it to circulate air, maybe. So with this system, airflow looks like it's going to be better, and making the system cooler is a lot easier process. A lot of us are probably going to more or less put it on the side, but I can kind of see why you would want to stand it up, and especially the way it looks, aesthetically, it looks great. And so for me, personally, the system, while I do like the system, I like how it looks, and personally for me, I have no problem with it, I do, however, have an actual problem. Aside from the color, keep in mind, I'm sure that by the time the system finally does get released, maybe Sony might reveal that, aside from the white version, you can also get a black version if you want to. Maybe within the next year or two, whenever there's like a collector's edition or something like that, they may have a system that is designed for like a particular game or something. I have no doubt in my mind they might do that. But there is actually another problem. And that's the fact that aside from the disc version that they also have a digital-only system. So much like how Microsoft did with the Xbox One S, where they had the disc version followed by a digital version of it, Sony seems like they're going to do the same way with the PS5. They're more or less testing it to see how many of their audiences is digital only versus how many people actually buy physical disc. And on the one hand, I don't like that. I don't like that feature. I don't like the fact that they're doing that. You know, but at the same time, the digital age is coming. It's not coming fast enough to some people, but it is definitely coming, you know. Companies want this whole digital age ASAP, as soon as they want it. They want it now, technically. Actually, they want it 10 years ago, technically. But it's not coming in fast enough. People don't want digital because there's too many complications with digital media. There's too many situations, there's too many aggregations, there's too many complications, situations, too many lawsuits actually that's strung up, you know, from anywhere between refunding a game to being able to download the game, much less the difficulty of being able to run it when not fully downloaded. So it's one of those things where it's like, digital isn't always right, and Sony is going to try to see how this works for them. Personally, I don't think it's going to work, but I do have one particular idea of how it might work, but that's for another video. Now, I do want to talk about the games that are going to be coming out for the system. Now, keep in mind, some of them are not exactly, not all of them are exclusive. Some of them are, but some of them are not. And, you know, you can kind of tell which one is exclusive and which one isn't. But at the same time, I also want to discuss about each individual thing. We're going to first talk about two particular games that are going to be for the PS5. I also want to talk about a couple of games that I'm kind of interested in, but they're going to be set on the segue in terms of the radar of my viewing, so on and so forth. It just, some of them are interesting, some of them are not. The bad thing is that not all of them were appealing to me. Some of them were okay, some of them was a little but then there was a couple of ones that made me go or really good. So when it came to games, while it wasn't a perfect setup list, it did give us a little bit of variety. So in other words, you know, it did what it did to show us games, but the bad thing is, it was all kind of a blur to me. So I was kind of, again, thus going back to what my thoughts were about the event and everything like that, it all was kind of blend in. It felt like a whole blur flash between my eyes and stuff, and it was like, it wasn't impressive, but it wasn't underperformance, if you will. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the games. So, first and foremost, of the games that I'm not interested in, but I do want to talk about, is SpiderMan for the PS5, featuring Miles Malone. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this was a good idea. This was a good idea to have a sequel to the Spider-Man game that came out for the PS4 a year ago. And the fact of how well that game did so flippin' well that it makes sense for why Sony would make a sequel to that. I was surprised to see that Sony went on ahead and actually had this game made to where it could be, it didn't say it was, but I say it's close to being a launch title for the PS5. And this is a good game to have for a launch title, you know. Again, when it first came out for the PS4, it did super well. It was really good. A lot of critics gave it really good reviews. And it sold ridiculous. It sold ridiculously well in terms of the sell charts for that particular week when it first came out. Followed by the month, for that matter, okay? That was insane. So, to have a sequel come out for the PS5, it makes perfect sense. Plus, Miles Malone, after Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that was a really good move. I think this will do well. It says holiday of 2020, but I'm going to tell you right now, this might come out as soon as the system launch. And if that's the case, the system's going to sell crazy. The game's going to do well, thus it will sell the system. I guarantee you, it will help sell the system. May not do record-breaking numbers, but it's going to do a lot of numbers that I think even Sony didn't predict it would make. And while technically we don't actually have any RPG games per se that's going to be coming out on the system right off the bat. We do have one, but I question whether it's an RPG or not. But it is Project Erta. Now, this is a Square Enix title that is being worked on. And technically, most of us kind of saw this when they did the demonstration for the Unreal Engine 5. And on the one hand, I wasn't impressed by it. But at the same time, I felt like this is technically from a game we're familiar with. This is Gravity Rush, isn't it? Because it had that feel. It had that ideology of just being able to surf through the sky and stuff. And at first I was like, this isn't a bad idea, but I don't quite see what it is. But it turns out, this actually might be a new IP that Square Enix is working on. But it says it's an action RPG, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I see the action, but what's the RPG, you know? Again, it kind of blended in, and I couldn't tell right off the bat. It looks like you're just jumping from platform to platform, or more or less jumping from land surface to land surface. You know, you're kind of like flying through the air or something like that. I don't know, gravity jump or force jump for that matter. I have no idea. We have nothing except for what we saw, and from what I saw, I really couldn't tell you what it was. You know, it kind of blended in with each other. Again, this is something that may work, but the problem is it's not going to be coming out. It could be a 2021, but from the way it sounds like it might be a 2022. So it might be a couple years before we see this game surface up again. And now I want to talk about a couple of games that looks interesting, and I have an interest in them, but they're going to be sitting on the sidelines for the time being. Maybe as soon as they come out, I might get a little bit more interested in them, but for the time being right now, they're not exactly an essential game that I might get. For example, Stray. So, Stray looks interesting in the fact that you're in this robotic world, you know. There's obviously no humans. It's all machine, all robots. And I kind of like the design that some of the robots have. I kind of like how it looks. It's interesting. It's an interesting ideal. It looks like you're looking through it from a cat's eye view. Thus the term Stray. So I think it's going to play out like a, a visual progression game. Where you're basically walking through the entire landscape, the entire worldscape for that matter, of its universe, and you're just kind of experiencing the world through a cat's eye. You know, you're playing as this cat. You're basically jumping on different boxes or obstacles to kind of progress through, and you're kind of seeing the world unfold, and you're kind of seeing what the world would be like if it was all machines, if it was all robots. So while it's not engaging like combat wise, it's engaging based on how it tells about this alternate world, this world of machines. And I kind of like that ideal. Again, it's not going to be engaging combat, but I kind of like how it looks. And so based on what I saw, I definitely want to give it a good look as soon as it comes out. It definitely looks appealing. It looks interesting, in my personal opinion. And then the last one I want to talk about, a game that did kind of look interesting, is that of Deathloop. Now, gameplay-wise, it kind of reminded me that of BioShock and BioShock 2. It definitely has that feel in terms of both gameplay and the atmosphere. The atmosphere is that, you know, the people are getting a high off on killing the main character, being that of you, obviously. And I'm sure the main character actually has a name, but I couldn't remember. But the main character dies. But he comes back only to have to continuously go through this loop over and over again, thus Deathloop. And basically it sounds like your main objective is to kill these 8 people who have organized this faction of people who are basically going to be killing you for entertainment. And basically it sounds like when you die, you start over from where you were at or at the very beginning. I hope it's not at the very beginning because that would discourage some players. But This is supposed to play off an ideal concept of like death and repeat, death and repeat. And while it sounds good on paper, for a lot of gamers, it sounds like Dark Souls, which immediately is a turn-off for a lot of people, and I can understand that. But Deathloop does sound interesting to me. It's definitely something worth checking out later on, and I might consider it, but for the time being right now, it's just going to be on the radar, just me looking at it and seeing if it might be good, might be interesting. But now let's talk about some of the games that do interest me, and surprisingly, while there wasn't as many games that I wasn't interested in, there was quite a bit that did have my interest. So I'm going to first start out at the bottom and then make my way up to the top. And the first one is that of Little Devil Inside. Now, this is obviously, from the looks of it, is an indie project game. But it actually kind of looks interesting in the concept of where it might be going. You have two sides. You have the older gentleman going through his luxury lifestyle and stuff, and then you have this other guy who is very adventurous, who basically is exploring the world and stuff, and he obviously encounters some strange and very interesting monsters that he encounters and stuff, and a lot of it actually looks cool. Like, I ain't gonna lie, some of it actually looks interesting. But because of it being very indie-ish looking, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't really... it's kind of hard to explain it. I'm not saying that it's bad looking. It's not, really. It's not. It's one of those things where it's like, usually I never go for games like this, but the combat looks interesting. The world looks slightly interesting. It's something that kind of grabs your attention and makes you go, hey, what do you think? And it's like, not bad. Not bad at all. Compared to everything else where it's like, oh, that's good, or hey, you got games. In this case, it's like, you know what? Yeah, definitely. So, it definitely has my interest. So, it's kind of unique in this way. Next one up is that of Solar Ash. And what got me interested right off the bat is the fact that it was made by the same people who did Hyper Light Drifter. And that was a really cool game. In my personal opinion, that was really awesome. One of the very few, I guess is an indie game. I don't know. Might be. But it was very interesting. I definitely liked it. The ideal, the realm that you were in, the gameplay, the monsters you fought. It was really fun and interesting, and I actually did enjoy it quite a bit. But this one looks like it's going to be more 3D platformy, but I still actually kind of like how it looks. I love how the main character looks. She's kind of cute looking, actually. She really does. Despite how weird it looks, I like it. I like the design. And I like how the world looks. Right now, we only saw a little bit of it, but as it finally comes out in 2021, it's definitely something to look forward to. So, definitely Solar Ash, definitely looking forward to whenever it comes out. So, up next, we have Horizon. Horizon is finally getting a sequel. We have been actually hearing for a while that we might get a sequel to Horizon. In fact, recently this year, there was a lot of people talking about it. And technically, I have yet to have played Horizon Zero Dawn, really. So really, to say that I'm interested in this isn't really fair because I still haven't played the first one. But I kind of like how it looks. I like the ideal of how she's in this new area. She's completely in a different location with new creatures, new ways to explore from the way people sound. And it sounds like there's a lot more to look forward to when going across this landscape. And I kind of like it. It's definitely interesting. I say I'll probably get even more hyped and more interested when I finally do play Horizon Zero Dawn. But definitely looking forward to Horizon Forbidden West. This is definitely something to look forward to. Next up, we have Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Let's put it this way, Ratchet and Clank is going to be a personal fan favorite of mine. I do love the Ratchet and Clank series. While they've definitely kind of segued a little bit lesser and lesser, there are some cases where they do really well. For example, the last Ratchet and Clank game we got was technically the reboot, and control-wise, it was really well. It was very, very good, and it was kind of enjoyable to kind of revisit an old world in a new light. It was very interesting, and it was very enjoyable with the storytelling, and personally, I love the movie that came with it. But I don't know if this is a direct sequel to the reboot, or if this is a continuation to the main Ratchet and Clank storyline that has progressed it thus far. So it's kind of hard to say where this is going, but I kind of like where the story is going with this Ratchet and Clank game, Rift Apart. Basically, all the dimensions are colliding together, and Ratchet is kind of like dimension hopping everywhere, and Clank eventually gets himself thrown into a completely different dimension. And from the way it looks like technically Dr. Nefarious wins in this dimension, and you see this new girl Lombax, and it's going to be interesting to see where they take this story. For the past couple of Ratchet and Clank games, ever since like the Ratchet and Clank Future game that came out for the PlayStation 3, they've been playing around the ideal that Ratchet is the only Lombax in the universe. You know, the only Lombax alive. And so they're kind of playing around that ideal concept still, but to see another Lombax entirely a different Lombax, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with the story, especially with the alternate dimension of Nefarious winning. So it's going to be interesting where this goes. I do, however, have one problem with this game, and again, it's only because of from what I'm seeing, and I could be wrong. I get the bad feeling that this whole dimension rifting mechanic that they're going to use might get boring to a certain degree. Like, at first glance, it looks fun, it looks entertaining, and in terms of combat and gameplay, it looks appealing, but I get the funny feeling that if they use this too much, it might overstay its welcome. When it comes to new gameplay mechanics, sometimes, depending on the company history when it comes to making games and stuff, if a mechanic gets overdone and overused, it eventually gets sour, and eventually the player just either forgets the game or just don't care much at all. You know, at first glance, it seems interesting, but then after a while, it just overstays its welcome. So I'm hoping that's not the case. Instead, the Rift Gate becomes an interesting mechanic on its own. Like, I like to see where this is going forward with this game. I'm hoping it does better. But so far, from what I'm seeing in terms of gameplay mechanic, it's definitely improving from where the Ratchet and Clank reboot did. And keep in mind, that one controlled really well. So to see where this might go, it could go well. It could go well. I'm looking forward to this one, definitely. And then next up, we got Keena Bridge of Spirits. This requires a little bit of explaining, because on the one hand, I kind of see what's going on, but at the same time, I don't, because it looks interesting. It looks very interesting to me. You have this interesting story concept where you have this girl controlling these little black furry things. They're supposed to be called spirits? Who knows? But these spirits, these sprites, are being used to either move objects or to hold enemies down long enough for you to deliver damage to them and stuff. And really, from what I saw, it looked interesting. It looked very promising. And don't ask me why I was thinking this, but when I saw those little black guys, I literally thought of Pikmin. Don't ask me why, but I thought of Pikmin, and I thought, if this team can do it well, we could possibly see Sony's closest iteration to another Pikmin-like game. Again, it's not the same way as Pikmin is, where Pikmin gather monsters and creatures, bring them to their pods, and create numerous numbers. No, this might do a little bit different, where this girl interacts with objects or interacts with plants and stuff, and gathers a lot more of these little guys and stuff, and these little guys can be enhanced to do different performances and stuff like that, to do different obstacles, and depending on how these creatures work, you could see some interesting puzzle mechanics that can be used to make the game more interesting. So this could work out. This could be a possible another Pikmin-like game. I don't think it is, but I don't know why. I just have this weird feeling that that's the case, because you see her using them to use in the environment, to be used to hold down enemies and stuff, and I just keep thinking to myself, why does this feel like Pikmin, even though it's not, but yet it feels it. Don't ask me why, but it kind of does. It kind of does. And so while every game that was talked about during that entire live event was sort of like meh versus this one made me kind of go, what? Or what? Or shout. You get what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is it got me perked up. You know, it was like a splash of hot coffee splash into your face and you go, I'm up, I'm up, I'm up, I'm up. So this is what got me interested. So before the reveal finally came out and stuff, a lot of people were actually talking about it, and a lot of people were subjecting, and a lot of people were saying which of these four would get you hyped for the PS5. And the four options was obviously that from Software. And they were, of course, a Bloodborne 2 or Elden Ring. Really, Bloodborne 2 would have definitely got me hyped up. If they were to announce a Bloodborne 2 right now, yeah, I'd be drop dead excited. I'd be just freaking insane. I'd be losing my mind. Because Bloodborne was awesome. That was an awesome game to have. And to have a Bloodborne 2 to start off the console generations would be even more insane. And technically, Elden Ring has been announced for about a year or so. And so, to kind of see more Elden Ring, but not only that, to be on the PS5, yeah, definitely looking forward to it. But they also said about something about an enhanced version of Bloodborne, and I'm like, I don't think that's something that they'll do. Maybe they might as like an anniversary collection or something, I don't know, but to see an enhanced version of Bloodborne, I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think they'll do that. But another thing that was shown off that I didn't think was going to happen, because the development team didn't show interest in doing it. Usually you can tell when a company shows interest if someone was talking about it or any news article surface up. But really, there was more subjects talking about Bloodborne 2 than this game right here. And when this showed up, I was shocked because it didn't show any interest at all of making this happen. But this game right here, the fact that they actually showed it, surprised the hell out of me. And that would be none other than Demon's Souls Remake. This caught me by surprise. This game literally caught me by surprise. I had no idea that they were going to do this. I had no idea this was even an interesting concept that they were going for. But yeah, it's happening. They're doing a remake of Demon's Souls. And to me, personally, Demon's Souls is a great ideal game to do a remake on, because when you play Demon's Souls now for the PlayStation 3, it definitely, unfortunately, is a rough draft. You know, when you play Demon's Souls, and then you play Dark Souls, and then Bloodborne, you see how different the gameplay has changed when it first came out for Demon's Souls. You see the advancement, you see the improvements. Demon's Souls is a very rough draft of the beginning projects of a Souls-like game. So, yeah, it definitely needs a remake, especially the imaging-wise, because everything kind of blur. Everything is like a haze, a fog almost. And it definitely needs a remake badly. I mean, if you saw me playing Demon's Souls whenever I played it on the PlayStation 3 a couple of years ago, you'll know where I'm going at. You know how that game looks and feels. So, yeah. To hear that this game's getting a remake, I'm excited. So I'm hoping that they'll definitely improve the gameplay mechanics, much like how Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 has been incredibly enhanced in terms of gameplay. Visually, you can tell it looks amazing. Visually, it looks beautiful. It looks insanely crazy. It looks awesome. Hopefully, the gameplay will carry through. So, again, while everything else was somewhat in the middle, this one was my highest hype. This was by far the biggest thing I was looking forward to. Hey, Grover, what's up? This happens way too often. Him just showing up. And now he's a parrot. Anyway, guys, those were my personal thoughts about the PlayStation 5 live event. All that they showed off in terms of games, the system, everything in genuine. It's definitely something to look forward to, but thankfully from what it sounds like this is just going to be a casual release for a new system. For any casual fan, I think this is an okay system to wait on. You know, this isn't a system that should be gotten right away because the majority of the games that they showed off won't even be released until after early 2021. So chances are it won't be until next year until you get a good list of games available for people who is going to be jumping onto the next console generation. But for those who might pick it up right off the back, you'll still get a good group of games available right on launch. So it's definitely something to keep note on. So guys, let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts on the PS5 and as well the games that are for the system. This has been BlackCross, and I shall see you in the next video. Till then, this is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.